Alright, so in today's video, I'm going to be giving you some tips on how to apply acrylic on longer nails. So the first thing that you want to do when you are applying acrylic on longer nails is you want to mentally divide the nail into 3 separate zones. Zone 1 would be the area closest to the end of the nail. Zone 2 would be that apex area, and then you have zone 3, which would be the cuticle area. So I'm beginning in zone 1, and as you can see, I didn't place my bead super close to the edge of the nail, and the reason that I didn't do that is because I don't want my acrylic to be too thick right there at the edge. You want to keep the thickness as about refer to the thickness of a nail as a credit card, like a metal credit card. You don't want your nails much more thicker than that. Of course, you have some clients who do prefer a thicker nail, but ideally you want to keep the thickness of your nail no thicker than a metal credit card. You may use more than 3 beads. I know I said divide the nail up into 3 sections, but if you need to, you can use more than 3 beads to apply acrylic on longer nails. One thing I will say is just be mindful of the size of the bead that you're using, because again, we want to be mindful of the thickness of the nail. So usually if you pick up a huge bead and you put it super close to that edge, 9 times out of 10, either A, you're going to end up pretty much just wiping that acrylic off on a napkin, or B, it's just going to build and it's just going to be super thick, and that's not what you want. Moving on to zone 2, I'm going to go ahead and apply my second bead. I like to thin out the top part of the bead, or push that top part of the bead upwards that you can see here, and I do this because I don't like the bumps that you get sometimes when you're doing everything in sections. You can get, those random little bumps or lumps. So to keep everything nice and smooth and even, I always push the top part of that bead just to thin it out some, so that everything is nice and level. And notice how I'm using the very tip of the brush to pull down that acrylic. I'm not using the belly of the brush. I'm not patting. I'm just simply with a light hand feathering that brush on downward using the very tip. I always recommend avoiding patting when you're trying to get everything leveled, and that's because usually you just make it worse, creating more dents. So again, with a light hand, feather that brush on downward until everything gets nice and smooth. I only use the belly of my brush to mold the acrylic, meaning allowing the acrylic to take the shape of whatever I'm trying to get it to take the shape of. In this case, it is the nail tip. So I only use the belly of my brush so that I can mold the acrylic so it can take the shape of the actual tip, as you can see here. So moving on to zone 3, I'm going to go ahead and place my cuticle bead. As you can see here, I'm not placing my bead directly at the cuticle. I'm placing it just right below it, and I'm pushing everything into place. And that's something that you want to do on an actual client. And then from there, I'm just feathering that brush on downward so that it can blend with the rest of the acrylic. So for beginners, I definitely recommend purchasing powders that are self-leveling and do not set super fast, so that you have time to really work everything in, get it nice and smooth. And if it's self-leveling, you're not going to have to do much anyway, because it's automatically just going to level as it sits. And that's why I enjoy working with play powders so much, because they're just perfect for beginners. They don't set up on you super quick. They're self-leveling, so if I just let it sit, eventually everything is going to even out on its own. And even if you aren't a beginner, it's great to have powders that you have time to work with, because most nail techs are perfectionists. We want everything to look good, and having a powder that just sets super quick can be quite tedious when you're trying to correct everything. So I definitely recommend play powders. They're super helpful, super easy to use. So once everything was smoothed out, I did go ahead and add another cuticle bead, because usually when I'm doing my cuticle beads, I always use a smaller bead and just build if I need to. So I'm just placing another bead here, again placing it right below the cuticle and just pushing it into place and feathering everything down. Alright guys, and here's the finished look of the first nail. Acrylic application only. It's a nice smooth satin finish. I'm going to go ahead and do a second nail for you guys, just showing you again the application and how I mentally divide that nail into 3 zones and work in sections. And again, that's the best thing that you can do for yourself when you are working with longer nails, is to work in sections. You do not have to do a 1 bead method. You don't even have to use 3 beads. Use as many beads as you're comfortable with, but always definitely work in sections when you are doing longer nails. Want to go ahead and show you guys from a different view the smoothness of the nail as well as the thickness. And as you can see here, it's nice and smooth, nice and leveled. The thickness is pretty much what I said. No thicker, it's a little bit thicker than a metal credit card, but as you can see there, the nail is pretty smooth and it's a nice and even surface there.